Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.
At Australian Book Lovers, our mission is not only about celebrating and sharing fabulous Australian and Indigenous authored books of all genres with readers around the globe, it's also about finding fantastic resources and information for authors looking to write their own book or two or three. And what better resource than getting into the writer's room of some of these authors and asking them to share their experiences. And this is episode 143, Veronica.
Indeed. Wowzers.
I am Laurie Bell, a science fiction and fantasy author, blogger, reviewer, flash fiction writer, and pretty much everything in between. And I'm coming to you today from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
Beautiful. And I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, memoir, picture book, science fiction and fantasy writer, podcaster, the co-founder, and coming to you today from the very chilly Woiwurrung country down in Victoria. And we have two fantastic authors with us today. We've got Christina Giuffré. How's that,
Giuffré.
Christina?
Very
Giuffré,
good.
Damn it. I had it there. Giuffré, I've written it down for myself. Christina Marie Giuffré. And Christina, you are not on even any Australian land, but tell us where you are tonight, first of all.
Well, for me, it's actually morning. It's 11 a.m. I'm over in Gibraltar, sunny Gibraltar, similar weather to Perth, where I'm from originally, Noongar country.
Beautiful. All right.
Beautiful.
And
Welcome.
our other author is Suzi Samuel. Hello, Suzi.
Hello.
Now, Suzi is up in New South Wales. We have that little, of course, you would be very aware of the competition between New South Wales and Victoria. Victoria is the best, can I just say that, Suzi? But, however, Suzi is up in southeastern Sydney. She's on Cadigal and Birra. Start again. Cadigal and Birra clan land up there. And as we know, there's lots of mobs in Australia working hard on treaty, being land that was never ceded. So here we are to talk writing and to talk memoir and to talk non-fiction and to talk thriller and to talk adult and children's books and lots of different things. So I suspect that there is more in common than there are differences, but we'll explore those as we go along. We'll start with reading people's biography. Laurie,
Yes.
you got that there.
I do indeed. So I will tell you a little bit about Christina. So Christina Marie Giuffré, originally from Perth, Western Australia, as just mentioned, with European heritage, Christina now calls Gibraltar home. With over 20 years of career experience and a lifetime of insight, Christina is a dynamic leader, coach, and passionate advocate for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. She creates environments where everyone can feel seen, heard, safe, and empowered to thrive. As a queer and neurodiverse individual living with ADHD and dyscalculia, her personal journey through anxiety, depression, and PTSD has shaped her unique perspective on compassion, resilience, and growth. With warmth, humour, and deep empathy, Christina feels that no matter the challenge, there's always a path forward to drive meaningful transformation in both business and life. I love that. Love that bio.
Thank you.
Yes, there is some, we have some great overlap, Christina, because I teach leadership and have been a coach for many years. And we've just put our leadership program in for an award with the Victorian Healthcare System. So I'm hoping I've got my fingers crossed. And I love that you're part of the, diversity, inclusion, belonging, which is something very close to my heart. I love that sharing your story, which is brilliant. But also memoir. I've written a memoir, Suzi. So, Laurie, tell us about Suzi as well.
Yes, indeed. So let's jump in. So Suzi Samuel was born in Hertfordshire, England, and spent most of her life in London. After leaving school at 18, she worked briefly as a secretary and then married her first husband, John, and settled down to life as a housewife and mother to a daughter, Louisa, in Wimbledon. Sadly, after 5 years of marriage, John suffered kidney failure and after a 3-year illness, including 3 transplants, died in 1980. On her own with a young daughter, Suzi decided to go back to studying. After a couple of years' work, she passed her final diploma in French at the Institute of Linguists and became a member of that August body in 1987. She then worked as a teacher and translator for many years. Following the deaths of her husband, her beloved grandmother, and a lovely old psychic lady who decided to pass on her mantle to Suzi, she quickly became aware that there was a whole other world out there and started to tell people really strange things that all came true. A surprise not only to the recipients of those tidings, but also to Suzi herself. This was the start of her work as a clairvoyant and psychic medium, and she has now been doing readings for more than 40 years with clients in many different countries. Having negotiated the dating minefield that was the 1980s and having survived quite a few, often hilarious, near brushes with matrimony, she met an Australian man, David. Following a whirlwind courtship, they married in 1997, moving from Hampshire, where they had lived for several years before coming to Australia. What an amazing bio.
Does it feel a little odd often, I think, to hear yourself spoken about by somebody else as you share? Because usually we have to put these bios together ourselves, but it's a little bit embarrassing. And, we were laughing at somebody the other day, not at somebody, with somebody who had a very short bio and the other person had a very hilarious one. But we hopefully helped this writer with a couple of things that we thought he should add to his bio as we spoke to him. So that was
Yes.
good. So, Suzi, Wimbledon to New South Wales. It's a long way to come.
Yes, Wimbledon to Bullara, really, didn't it?
Oh, yes, I was thinking there was a word there, but I couldn't remember the suburb. But yes, thank you.
It was a long way, but my husband was very sneaky because he was desperate to get home. He'd spent most of his working life in England, but he got cold and he wanted to come home. So what he did was bring me on a few softening up holidays until I totally fell in love with Australia. And then it was, oh my goodness, it was minus 23 or something one winter. And he said, right, enough's enough. We're going to Australia. And so we packed up the dog, left my daughter behind because I thought she was old enough to get on a plane. And here we are.
Fantastic. And the weather hasn't looked back since, because I must admit Sydney's weather is a little warmer than us down here.
Although this week it's been a bit rotten.
Yes.
Not been too good this week. I think Christina's much better off in Gibraltar this week.
Oh, most definitely. It's summer.
You made some good choices, yes. Having spent 2 years in Perth, I will admit that their weather is a little better than ours. However, I could never wear my coats and cardigans, Christina. It was always, barely cardigan weather over there. So, I like Melbourne. It does get freezing cold. We have the fire on. All right. Enough about all of those things. Let's jump into some stories about books. And just everybody's, we're going to pop the books up if you happen to be watching. And we're going to share, first of all, the blurb for Dear Friend, which is Christina's book, her first book, the book we're going to mostly talk about.
Yes.
The blurb, here we go with the blurb for Dear Friend. Your companion for navigating life's twists and turns. Ever feel like life is one long game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, you're the only one left standing? This book offers you a seat that you've been waiting for, a space where you belong exactly as you are. Written from the heart by someone who has walked this path, this is more than just a book. It's a spiritual self-help guide and your companion for navigating life's ups, downs, and unexpected plot twists with unwavering self-love. Whether you're struggling with self-doubt, emotional well-being, work-life balance, or are simply in need of a motivational pick-me-up, you'll find practical tools, humour, and a safe space to explore difficult emotions and invest in your personal growth. Celebrate diversity, find inclusion and belonging, build emotional resilience, and be your own biggest cheerleader. This inspirational guide will help you find strength in vulnerability, cultivate self-compassion and kindness, and rediscover the unstoppable potential within you. Remember, you are worthy, loved, and more than enough. Shine like the star you are.
Wow.
What a beautiful blurb. It's lovely, isn't it?
Yes, gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I love
And
the formatting, which hopefully we'll get into in a little bit, because the ability to just go to a topic that happens to be grabbing you at the time or that you need a little bit of help with, it's such an easy book to jump straight into. So I really enjoyed
yeah.
that.
Thank
And
you.
it also things to remember. Now, I can't remember which chapter I had a little dip into, and it might have been about grief, saying that it's a bit like glitter. Once it's out, go. And I think that's just such a beautiful analogy. So, Christina, can you tell us a little bit about where Dear Friend began in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I actually had a dream. I just woke up and I'm like, I really want to write on this topic. It was so, I don't know, even the title of it, everything just came to me. And because I'd done quite a bit of coaching with different people, so life coaching, business coaching, and there was always a common theme. It's just like this
Mm.
lack of love for ourselves. So I felt
Mm.
that quite strongly. And then having ADHD myself, sometimes I find it hard to focus and to read really long books. And I find like there's certain books that I'll just jump in and jump out of. And I wanted to design something like that anyone could just pick up. And it was like a friend talking to them, like guiding them through it, explaining things in simple language, not too much jargon, not like a self-help book, but more a guide and a friend. So the book was designed to be a friend. In terms of writing it, I wrote it in a hyperbaric chamber. So I was getting oxygen therapy because I had a knee operations a long time ago. So I was in this chamber and you can't bring your phone, you can't bring any entertainment. So I just started writing and it literally just poured out of me, pen to paper.
That's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in another strange coincidence, I was talking to a friend from Perth today who used to manage the hyperbaric chambers down at Fremantle for all the divers. So there you go. So, it's always the links are there, aren't they? We're 6 degrees of separation, not there at all. All right, Suzi, let's read the
Yes.
blurb for the unintentional medium. What do you do when you suddenly realize that there is a whole other world out there which is opening up to you? You ride the whirlwind, hang on tight, and enjoy this whole new adventure of being an unintentional medium. This is a story of an adventure, a step into the unknown, a collision of worlds, and what happens to the unsuspecting young woman who happens to have been chosen by the spirit world to act as their messenger. The true story leads us through an eventful and often hilarious life, describing events and people, both here and in the spirit world, who have played such a part in this journey. A newly single girl on the London dating scene, and who, after several close escapes, finally finds happiness with her handsome Australian husband. Not only are the spirits extremely happy about this, they redouble their efforts to get their message across and pop in with increasing regularity. A cross between Bill Bryson, Bridget Jones and Ghost, with a dash of Carrie Bradshaw thrown in for good measure. Absolutely hilarious. It sounds fantastic. So,
Does.
Suzi, where were you inspired to write the book, or who, shall I say, inspired you to write the book?
It's terribly interesting what Christina was just saying about it just sort of came to her and poured out of her. And the same thing happened to me. Well, sort of a bit more with the second book, but with this one, we go back to my time in first trip, softening up trip to Australia. And just before I came out, a friend of mine bought me it was really posy, actually. A pretty little pink leather book with travel notes embossed in gold. And so you can imagine me first time in Australia with this little book taking notes and sort of one or two embarrassing experiences, like seeing a dog in the back of a ute for a first time and saying, darling, do look at that dog in the and the man came out and I said, I say, would you mind frightfully if I said hello to your dog? And he said, no, you're all right, love. But, so because I was a lot more English then. So I found all these notes, right? And I thought I might just write a book about Australia. Now, well, about my things in Australia. Now, I'd never thought of writing anything before, although my dear old medium had told me I would, and I thought she was an idiot, quite frankly. And I told her so because I loved her, and that was all right. But anyway, when I got back from the first holiday here, I was actually diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I had to have radiotherapy, and it was okay, but it's really boring. I'm not belittling it, but the actual process is boring. And so there I was on the slab, and having to keep still. And so to pass the time, I sort of started writing the first couple of lines about this Australian book. And all of a sudden, I'm lying there on the slab, and this voice, like Moses on the Mount, said, "Wrong book." And I'm looking around like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? Who's that? And then it said, "Write about what you know." And so I thought, well, the only thing I know is what's happened to me and the way I became a medium and things. And so that's how the first book was born. And both books, I think the second one more than the first, it really was as if I had no control over what I was writing. It was just, as Christina said, pouring out of me. And I like to think I'm a bit like Truman Capote, who said, when somebody asked him how it ended, he said, "I haven't got a clue, it's up to the characters." But I honestly don't think I'm in the same class as him. But it was so interesting to hear Christina say that, because it was the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Fantastic. I wonder, should we preface this episode by saying you do not need to be in a medical device to have
to write a book.
This is true. This is true.
So much more in common than we realize. All right, Laurie, your turn.
Well, I was actually going to say, so both of you have written about what you know. And I think that really translates into the book. So you had your inspiration to write the book. What was your next step? So you wrote it all down, but what happened next for you, Christina?
For me, it was interesting because AI was just emerging when I wrote the book. So I didn't write the book with AI, but I had all of these photos of all the written notepads I had with all of the words from that. And I needed to somehow get that into the computer. So rather than type in this by hand, I scanned in all of the images and got AI to basically put everything written. Then the editing process is the longest part of this, as you probably all know. My gosh, how many edits I did. So I probably did maybe 8 myself. I had a professional editor. I had, my husband, my friends, like everyone looking in. And then I think for me, like I'm kind of a big picture as well as can zoom in, but I needed the big picture. So I had all these pieces and I'm like, how do I structure this? Like, where do I put them? And I had naturally written them as little like excerpts. Every time I went into the chamber, it was like an hour at a time. So I kind of wrote each of the chapters and started like basically separated by different emotions. So it was like, how do I order these? How do I group them together so it makes sense to somebody? But also for someone with ADHD like myself, you can just dip in and dip out. So thinking about that structure took time on its own. The editing, the hugest part. And then I think also you've got to think about the marketing, because sometimes you like write the book, you're like, how do I get this out there?
Yeah.
And for me, like my goal wasn't to make money. I wasn't like, this is to make money. This is to get this message out there that I wish I had when I was growing up. So is that, how do I get this in front of the right people? So obviously in this world, you try and approach editors, agents, you look at social media, like you've got so many different things to think about. And for me, that wasn't the most difficult part because I have a marketing background, I have a marketing degree. So that was easier for me than it has been for some other authors that I've spoken to. So yeah, there's just so much going on when you're writing a book.
Yeah, absolutely. And Suzi, what about yourself?
Well, I didn't actually have an editor for the Unintentional medium. I hadn't realized that at the time because I was very new to it. But I did think, as I got a few comments and looked at it, people were saying about it wasn't chronologically very good. So I decided, in my wisdom, about a few months ago, to rewrite it. And so I mean, it's not very different. It's just gutted around a bit, and so that was the first one. But I did think when I had the second one, I had an absolutely wonderful editor called Kate Stevens. She was really fantastic. And as for the marketing, Christina, I envy you with your marketing degree. I didn't have a clue. And my husband, bless his heart, set up a publishing company, and so we were publishing it ourselves. And I got a really, really fantastic publicist called Nicole Webb, and she has helped me so much, because at my advanced age, I'm really not very, no, seriously, I'm very old. At my age, I didn't really manage very well with social media. I'm learning, but she's helped me so much with that as well. So it's been, yes, it is a long, slow process. I mean, quite frankly, I think Christina will probably agree with me. The writing is the easiest bit. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Particularly in writing what you know.
yes,
and
exactly.
yeah,
Yes,
Nicole Webb
yes.
is lovely. She's a great supporter of her authors, and we have a number of her authors on.
Yes, she's wonderful.
Okay, is it my turn?
No, I think it is.
All right, let's take you back to writing and reading when you were young. So, Christina, your favourite book as a child?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I read a lot. I read a lot of different styles of books. So I liked some of the fantasy. I liked horror, like Goosebumps. When I was little, as little as I can remember, was like begging my dad and my mum to buy me Goosebump books.
Yes.
I used to read that.
There's
But
about 1,000 of them, weren't there? The Goosebump books.
yeah, there was a
Yes.
lot. But I would say what's inspired me the most, and this is what has inspired my children's book, is actually Enid Blyton. I really love the way that she makes things simple. The way she talks about food and the way she describes childhood is something I always wished I had. So for me, I had a difficult childhood, so this was kind of an escape, and it made me feel like this is what it could look like, and it was kind of bringing that wonder and that positivity into my childhood. And even now, I have to admit that I still read Enid Blyton books now. Even though they're simple, they're children.
Great. No,
Yes.
they're great. I've got a whole stack of them in the cupboard.
Yeah,
So many
yeah.
people, quote that stories, the Magic Faraway
Magic
Tree
Faraway
and
Tree.
Secret
Yes.
Seven, all of those as being
Magic
so
Faraway Tree for
influential
sure.
in their childhood. I wonder in another 20 years, because there weren't, let's face it, there weren't that many books out. They were more limited. You had to get them shipped and all those kind of things. Whereas now books are at the touch of a button, a click of a mouse. You can download and get them delivered the next day and all those kind of things. I wonder what books people will say inspired them in 20 years, what they'll be reading, whether it'll be more broader, whether there still will be, parents foisting Enid Blyton, as I did, on my children and enjoying it, because she did have a beautiful voice, didn't she? Something that I think, we picked up, Christina, in your work. I love the friendly, relaxed voice, and I like the way you've described it as being, it's a friend that you have, and that is a hard sort of line to walk, to be educational, to be inspirational, but also to be, so relatable, I think.
Yeah, and you have to be honest and you have to be vulnerable to do that. I mean, if I didn't write this from the heart and didn't put awkward pieces of myself into it, then I think people wouldn't be able to relate, because this is what I find reading some self-help books. You think, oh, well, this person seems perfect. Unless you read Brené Brown, where she's super vulnerable in the books. And,
Absolutely.
that kind of inspired me that it's safe and it's okay to kind of put that out there, but still it's scary to share that voice and that
Absolutely.
authenticity, but you don't get the outcome if you don't do it.
No,
And you've
you're
kept it
quite
so
right.
positive as well, which I really, really enjoyed reading, is just that. And then jumping into your picture book, which I want to have a quick chat about, which is a completely different type of writing, a different style. Why a picture book?
Well, so with my adults book, actually, I didn't realize it would appeal so much to teenagers, because I do volunteer work with a group of children in Gibraltar, and it was a way for them to kind of bring that message of self-compassion early, but then realize obviously there's a year group under that. There's the younger 4 to 10-year-old audience, and like how could I make something accessible for them. So it was really taking the premise and the ideas of the previous book, which did include really cute characters, which I can talk about, but it was bringing them into a more simple story-like format to share that same message of self-love and acceptance, diversity and inclusion. So I brought the characters, which is Sunny and Shapito. So Sunny was my dog who passed actually a year ago, 2 days ago.
Oh,
Oh,
He was a little rescue dog from RSPCA. He was 14 years old. But yeah, he just had such a spirit. And I think I remember thinking like when I first got him, you couldn't touch him. He was so he'd been hit or something, and he would always cower, and you couldn't touch him. But then over time, like his little personality came out, and he was resilient. He was happy. He made us laugh a lot. So I wanted to bring his energy into the book. And it was actually I saw a counselor when he died because I was so upset and with grief, obviously. And she suggested, she's like, well, what did you learn from him? What could he bring to the world? And that's kind of inspired me to include him both in the adults book and in the children's book. But the children's book is like next level because that allows him to live on and actually have adventures and to play and to also share the positive messages. And I wanted him to have a friend. So he has a non-binary sheep called Chapito, and they
So
really
cute.
support him. They support him through his emotional ups and downs. Because I mean, in real life, he was quite emotional. So kind of bringing that character to life and kind of supporting him through it. And again, being the dear friend that we saw in the previous book, but bringing that to a children's character so it can be relatable for children. And basically, that it's okay to be you.
yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, I love that. And sorry, Susie, I did cut you off. You were going to tell us about your childhood books?
yes. Well, actually, it's very strange. Christina and I have so much in common because when my golden retriever died, I was absolutely distraught, the one I brought from England. And I've actually got a book in the works called The Magic Dog for children, which is based on I called him Sydney, which was a great name in England, but stupid over here. But so yes, my childhood books, I would definitely agree with Enid Blyton, everything she wrote. Anne of Green Gables was another one. I remember crying my eyes out when I read the last book because there wouldn't be any more about Anne and Gilbert. But then I had other things like Rosemary Sutcliffe's Eagle of the Ninth and things like that. I read I was quite surprised when it was a teenage book and I read it when I was about 8, But I have a very eclectic mix, I think. I had a mother who was very keen on literature and poetry, so that was nice.
Excellent.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's very
We need
good.
those influences. Now, I want to just dive into a couple of characters that ghostly grannies giving cooking tips. Laurie writes about grandmothers a lot in her science fiction fantasy and all of her books. But I really want to know about the grannies. Can you share?
The main granny is my granny, I was closer to her, well, as people often are to their grannies, closer to her than to anybody in the whole world. And so she started coming through to me very early on in my career as a psychic, if you like. And she was wonderful at seeing off unsuitable boyfriends. She would frighten the bejesus out of them. I mean, I've actually seen it a couple of times happen. And then they say, oh, God, and they'd be off, So she was very good at that. And she's a whiz at finding parking spaces.
Oh, love
Seriously,
that.
seriously, Granny, please find me a parking space, pole position. And in fact, my friends
Rockstar.
borrow her,
Please, Susie's granny, find me a parking space.
Exactly. The other one is my husband's granny, and she's called Prusel. And again, on our first trip to Australia, we went to Kalgoorlie because his father was born there. And so we were looking for his roots and everything else. And we stayed at a hotel in Kalgoorlie, and we were at a table for 4. And David's sitting opposite me, and there's an empty chair next to me. And all of a sudden, this little lady pops in and sits herself down and says, hello, dears. And I said to David, I think your granny's here. And of course, he couldn't see her. But the whole evening I was saying, Prussell says this, Prussell says that. And he said he was amazed because he said afterwards, you couldn't have known any of that. And so she popped in, but she is a whiz in the kitchen, right? And if I'm having a problem, because I love to cook, I really love to cook. But if I ever have a problem, I'll say, "Oh, Prussell, what do I do now?" And she'll come to my rescue. And she also disapproves of my posture. She has been known to poke me right in the middle of the back in public places, causing me to go and scatter old ladies on Zimmer frames and small children. So they're my ghostly grannies.
Oh, that is beautiful.
That's brilliant. I can imagine reading many stories of these ghostly grannies because they sound like a hoot.
Yeah. Believe me. And they're very partial to a game of bridge together, which is really nice.
Very helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Suzi, your connection to the spirit world, I imagine it is always constant, but how do you manage to keep yourself operating, I guess? Yeah, sane is a word, but yeah, how do you keep yourself operating when all these bodies and messages are popping in and out?
Well, it can be difficult, and especially if you go somewhere like the Colosseum or where I was in a place called Oradour-sur-Glane, which the Germans in the war, they were after some resistance people who had blown up a railway track, and they got the wrong place. They should have gone to Oradour, but they went to Oradour-sur-Glane, and they shot all the men and put all the women and children and the priest into the church and set fire to it. Now, going somewhere like that is hell, because you hear the voices, you hear the screams, but I found quite early on that if I didn't put boundaries, then I would just be bombarded a bit. So now I have my little routine before I start a reading. And I more or less say, right, come on, guys, I'm ready to go now. And then at the end, I close down, because if you don't put the barriers up a little bit, I mean, they still come in with messages. And if I'm talking to my husband or a girlfriend or something, they'll come in and say this, that, and the other, and so that's a bit different. But generally, to stop this, you can't just be open all the time, because it would actually send you crackers if you did. So, that's how I stop it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Busy minds, Christina, with thoughts that come and go, talking about shame, talking about grief, talking about hopelessness, all of those things. And you've shared some beautiful ways to help people work their way through or understand where they're at and give them some ideas for going forward. In terms of how the format works, can you tell us a little bit about that? Laurie mentioned that earlier.
So it starts off with a welcome, because it's like you're meeting a friend for the first time, like you're kind of welcoming that person in. And there's two safe places that is discussed in the early chapters. So it kind of sets you up to have this tool, like when you're moving forward through the chapters. So for example, there's a safe place in the real world, in reality. So I mean, many, many years ago, I suffered from panic attacks. And for me, like just lying on cold tiles is a safe place for me. I feel like I connect back. I feel like woken up again. I don't know how to explain it. But for some people, it might be a comfy chair. It might be they've got a balcony. It might be a garden. Whatever that physical place in the real world is, it's finding like a place where you can just be alone and be safe. And then the second one, and sometimes you can't get that space in the real world, is one in your mind. So it's like closing your eyes, being somewhere quiet. It might even be at work in a toilet stall, but then being able to imagine in your mind this beautiful, safe place, this beach, this cozy cabin, just somewhere where you can feel relaxed and you can let go. So that's kind of like bringing that safe place at the beginning as a foundation. And then when things get tricky, if you're reading through a chapter and it's triggering something, then you've got that safe place to fall back into. So the chapters are all set in different themes and around key emotions. So the way that it's written is that it's quite short, the chapter, because then you can get like the funny anecdote at the beginning, the relatable, the, you know, sharing a part of myself in that story. But then also it's got small little chapters where you can have tips and little ideas on how you can manage it. And then it finishes with a positive quote, like something relatable to that particular topic. And then after that page, there is a couple of tools. So there's affirmations, for example, questions to ask yourself to kind of reframe your thinking. Yeah, just a few helpful things.
That's what
And
I
then,
really loved about it.
yeah, because then you don't just leave that chapter. So one of the chapters on anger, for example, you don't just leave that chapter like, now what do I do? It's kind of like you get that relatable, warm friend at the beginning, and they're guiding you through. Then you're getting the tips to finish with that you can take away. And then at the very end of the book has got basically rewritten like a friend, like the different techniques, for example, from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, from cognitive behavioral therapy. So kind of making those more relatable on how do you actually do it yourself.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the step further is the digital version of this, which is I created a chatbot. So you can basically talk to this chatbot and it will talk back to you like the book. So there's a way to kind of make the book come to life and a way to make it a bit more accessible for younger generations as well.
Fantastic.
Fascinating.
Lovely to hear somebody using AI for good.
There are many ways to use it for good.
Yes.
Indeed, yeah. Coming from the medical, I'd say yes, but unfortunately, we sit in the writing community, and most people just feel a bit ripped off at the moment. So this is lovely.
Yes. And I do like the reframing of when you are in that particular headspace. So I really found that was fantastic to have a read. And I think for readers out there, if they get stuck in a certain frame of mind, it's a great book to help you rethink about how you're speaking to yourself, which I thought was
Exactly.
really good.
And in some of those tricky chapters, I mean, I've had a lot of people give feedback that they've cried during the book, like quite a few times, but it was a release and they felt kind of good about it. But in the really tricky chapters, like anger, for example, I try and throw some humor in there. So then it actually shifts them out of the anger as well. So it's intentional to throw, you know, a little bit of humor and make it a little bit lighthearted without obviously minimizing what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, nicely balanced. Suzi,
Yes.
a lot of adventures, before we move on to your horror thriller, which is, a little bit of a polemic to talk about. One of your favorite adventures, or one of your inspirational messages from working as a medium? You mentioned sometimes you've helped people unexpectedly. Can you share one of those stories with us?
Yes, this is my favorite reading I ever did. And if I do nothing else in my life, I'll remember this one. I was giving a reading to a friend when I was in London, and a lady rang my doorbell and she said, "I don't know if you can help me. My husband's dying." And I thought, oh dear God, because, I panicked a bit inside. I didn't show it. But I thought, oh, my God, I don't know how to deal with dying husbands, And she said, will you give me a reading? Oh, geez, you can imagine, can't you? So we booked for the next day, and she came along. And, of course, what was one of the first cards that turned up but the death card? Now, you can tell people until you're blue in the face, it doesn't mean death. It means new beginnings, new starts, new opportunities. But my death card is the death is quite a cheerful chappy, right? And he looks as if he's at a Greek wedding with ribbons coming off him and things. And as I looked at this, because as I look at a card, it's not what the card signifies so much, it's what I see in it. And as I looked at this card, I thought of my cousin Tim. Now, Tim at the time was doing a PhD in marine biology, and he was doing a study into something called bilharzia, which is waterborne and spread by snails. And he used to send me Christmas cards, love from Tim and the snails, you see. So I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, why the heck am I getting Tim and the snails? So as I looked at it, I said to her, have you been to Africa? And she said, yes, we came back a couple of months ago. And I said, did your husband go in water? I said, I don't mean the sea, I mean a river or a lake. Oh, sorry, I missed out a bit. I'm terrible at this. I miss out the important bits. She said that her husband had been diagnosed with bone cancer and that he only had 6 weeks to live. So as I'm looking at this, I said, you know, did he go in a river or a lake? And she said, oh, God, yes, he spent a lot of time windsurfing on a lake. So I said, look, please carry on with what the doctors are telling you, but do me a favor and take him to the hospital for tropical diseases. And so she went out, and I'm thinking, oh, poor woman, this is awful, you know. Anyway, 6 months later, I get a phone call. And she said, I don't know if you remember me. It's the woman whose husband was dying. And I said, I thought, oh, God, you know. And she said, I'm at Heathrow Airport. We're just going to Hong Kong to his daughter's wedding. And you were absolutely right. It was a tropical disease. He'd got a not bone cancer. So if I do nothing else, that it humbled me, quite frankly. I felt very, very humble about that.
It's a beautiful story.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yes, I know. Oh, gosh, it
I have
still gets
goosebumps.
me.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Oh. Well, coming off that then, so what, and I will start with you, Suzi, what's the best response then that you've had to your writing? Because obviously there's a lot of stories there that you've got with your book, and I think it's your thriller that is actually published, is that right?
Well, they're both published.
Oh, they
They're
are
both
both
published.
published. Okay,
But
fantastic. So what's the best response that you've had to your writing?
it was from my editor, Kate Stevens, and she said, when she first came back with the edits, she said, wow, Suzi, before I start, let me tell, I wonder if it's on the back of the book. Hang on a sec. She said, you've really done it. You've written a real page turner. It's fantastic. And I've put a little bit on the back of the book, and it says it's a page turner of a supernatural thriller with swoon-worthy romance, gorgeous scenery, mysterious green-eyed Frenchman, fascinating history, nail-biting action, plus so much incredible food. And she then said she was very tempted to take her family off to southwest France.
Oh, wow. That is really great feedback.
Yes. And I mean, it's all very well when people who love you say, oh, wow, it's wonderful. But, you know, to have a professional that I didn't know come out with that, I thought, oh, my God, you know, couldn't get my head through the door for a few days.
That is lovely.
Yeah.
I'm just going to point out one other very small connection here. So my husband had a very strange thing on his hand. We went to the doctor and they thought it was a skin cancer. Then he had lumps all up his arm and they thought, oh, he had metastases.
Oh, my
It was all
God.
very dreadful. And it turned out to be fish tuberculosis because he put his hand in water and the fish tank, and apparently it's something that the fish get. But it wasn't until we went to the infectious diseases that they had a multidisciplinary meeting and they said, oh, no, that's not cancer. That's what this is. But again, 6 months of terror thinking this is it, we're going to lose him. So I just think there's the most bizarre connections between this group. This is fantastic.
Yes.
We do have a
Isn't
good
it?
We were meant to be in this meeting tonight.
That's
So
exactly
thank you.
right. So,
Definitely.
Christina, what's the best response you've had?
Well, I mentioned I had a few people say that they cried, but I had one guy that used to work for me a long time ago, and he said, I read your book. And he said it quite gruffly. I was like, oh God, what's he going to say? Like, was it terrible? It was like badly written. I don't know. But he's like, I cried. And I was like, okay. And he's like, many times. And he's just like, I just needed to hear that from somebody. I'm not hearing that message that it's okay to be me, that what I'm going through is okay. Like it just, it meant the world. And I think for me, like that moment was like the book was worth it. I don't care what else happens. Like that's amazing. But then I've had other people that had this beautiful woman that's a CEO of a charity in Gibraltar here. And she bought the book and similar thing. She was, it really resonated with me. And she's bought like 10 copies. She keeps giving them to her friends because she's like, I want to give this message of kindness to my friends. Like I want more people to feel this way. So I think that's kind of beautiful. It's like that act of like paying it forward.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's gorgeous.
Lovely.
Yeah.
All right, Suzi, then you switched to writing this thriller from the, gentle, let's just say, memoir. And where did this thriller come from? Because there was another message that got that started. Is that right?
Well, yes, it was very peculiar. I had written a prequel to the Unintentional medium, which was my life up until the time I became a medium. And it wasn't psychic, but I have had a really crazy life and funny things happened to me. So I've written this book, and it had been edited by a lovely lady and who was quite keen on it. And we got a lovely cover, and it had gone to the typesetters, and it was all ready to go to the printers. In fact, we were going to send it to the printers that day. Now, backpedal a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and I'd had this strange message coming through to me. And I kept hearing a voice in my head saying 1468. Now, it wasn't 1468, it was definitely a date, 1468. And it's not something that you'd remember like 1066 or 1946 or anything like that. And I thought, what the devil are they going on about 1468 for? So I Googled it, and the only thing that happened that year, can you believe, of any import, was the then Pope made witchcraft a criminal offence.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, why are they going on about witchcraft? You know, this is very odd. So I kept thinking, and then they kept putting me in France and witchcraft. And I thought, well, okay, I've lived in France. I worked as a translator, you know, that's fair enough. I know France very well. And as I thought about it a bit more, this idea came into my head, and it is actually set between 1468 and the present day. I mean, on the surface, it's like every other book. Young couple go to France, find a house, fall in love with it, do it up, ghosties, you know, but it's actually more than that, because the trouble all relates back to 1468, and it's how the two sort of mingle. So that was very strange. But they kept insisting that I kept writing, and even in the middle of the night, I'd be fast asleep and I'd feel poke, 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 and get up and write. No, going back to sleep. Poke, poke, poke. No, you're not. Get up and write. No, I'll quit in the morning. No, you won't. Get up now. And honestly, I tried resisting for an hour one night, and it kept on. So then in future, when they woke me up, I'd just think, oh, all right, get up, write a chapter, and then go back to sleep, you know. So it was quite funny, actually.
It almost sounds like you've got an inside edge, you know. We're feeling a little bit like we don't have my muse is not nearly as vocal as yours, which is sometimes a good thing. Perhaps I get more sleep. Now, Christina, a little bit, sorry, Dory, were you going to jump in?
No, you go.
Yeah, I was just thinking our readers and listeners, a lot of them are authors as well. They love to hear a little bit about your writing methods. And now, Christina, you've talked about being for, you know, hours at a time in the hyperbaric chamber.
Okay.
Is that your writing routine? How is your knee? You know, do we have to wait for another knee injury before we get another book? Or do you have a writing routine for something else?
No, not at all. I mean, bulk of it was written under those circumstances, but I had a similar experience to Suzi. I didn't have anyone poking me, don't get me wrong, but I did wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., literally for like a month straight. I kept waking up at this time, and that's when I was most motivated. And I just got up, got on the computer, and wrote, edited. So I would say it's just when you feel that inspiration, so like trusting yourself within. If you try and force it, and if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, nothing will happen. That's when I think writer's block happens.
That's when my
Absolutely.
procrastination kicks in.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know Nair Ayol. He did quite a few books. He did Hooked. He did Distractible, but he talks about this procrastination and getting to the root of that. And there's something you're trying to avoid or something that you haven't quite overcome. And in a lot of times, like if you ask yourself, what is that thing? It's like I'm scared of failing this, or you know, I'm putting pressure on myself because I want to be some big success. Really, my heart says it's just about the message. So it's kind of figuring out what it is that's blocking you, and then all of that goes away once you figure that out.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Nicely put.
I can hear the coach in your words, Christina. We can't help ourselves, which is a good thing. What's next on your list, Suzi? You've got a sequel for both of your books.
Yes, well, as I say, there's the prequel to the Unintentional
prequel, sorry,
Medium.
yeah.
Yes, that's all written and ready to go. But as I say, when I finished the Dark at the Threshold the day it was ready to go. So we leapfrogged it on the understanding that people would rather read a supernatural thriller than the memoirs of a dotty old woman, quite frankly. And so
There's readers for
I don't know
everything.
about
There's
that.
readers for everything.
and so I've got an unintentional journey that's already set to go, and I've got a cookbook in the works, and also this children's book, and I'm about a third of the way through the sequel to The Dark at the Threshold, which has a working title of Long Tentacles of the Dark.
And
Ooh,
please
I
tell
like
us,
that.
share with us the name of your cookbook. I love it.
Well, it's medium rare. Spirit in my kitchen.
That is just brilliant.
That is
Nice.
fantastic.
Love it.
Oh, this is so good.
Oh,
Christina,
absolutely.
what have you got in the works?
So Dear Little One, You're Perfect As You Are is the story with Sunny and Shapito. So I'm actually getting the first printing of that this Friday.
That's
So that's
lovely.
So
exciting.
exciting.
Yes.
And there'll be, because it's summer over here and summer in Europe and Gibraltar, everyone parties, they leave the country, whatever. So I'm doing the official launch in September. So likely in
Wonderful.
collaboration with a local charity. Other than that, I have already had a charity reach out to discuss doing a collab on a book, because I
wow.
really love to do something for children, neurodivergent children, so something that is accessible. So it's not a kid's book, it's a light read to help bring this same message that it's okay to be different. It's okay, from, autism or fear of sound or whatever it is, like there is a path forward. So something along that. And then from the adults book perspective, I've already started doing the chapter and planning for the next book, which is about love. So I often get asked about,
Ooh.
so we've done this
Oh,
friendship and navigating difficult emotions, but how do you navigate building a real connection with somebody else, like a life
Wow.
connection? So that's
oh,
what I've been
fantastic.
thinking about.
That sounds
Yeah.
fantastic. To sort of bring it all full circle. So what's the most useful writing advice that you've ever been given? Christina, we'll start with you.
Interesting. So I did actually meet with a couple of different authors. One of them was a best-selling author and kind of asked this advice. There's a couple of different ways of approaching this. So some people approach the writing as a way of bringing more business on if they're a coach or a consultant. That really didn't resonate with me. So for me, it was kind of like the anti-advice. So I looked at that kind of path and there was a coach involved and I went to one of the seminars and kind of heard what they were doing there. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. So I think that is helpful to actually figure out what kind of writer you are, what you're trying to get, not just get out of this, but what you're trying to give. Like what is the purpose of all of this? And then staying true to that purpose. So I think, yeah, it was hearing all of the advice that, and I'm not saying this group is wrong. I mean, there's a different approach. It's just not my approach. So it was kind of listening to all the different views on how to do this and then picking my own approach.
I like that. And Suzi?
well, I had a very simple piece of advice. Before I actually wrote An Unintentional Journey, I was messing around with a couple of different things and then I worried a bit and I thought, oh my goodness, I did have to put the brakes on because I thought my daughter's going to read this. So, not that there was anything too scurrilous in it, but even so, And so I said to my then publisher, who has sadly retired, I said, Catherine, I said to her, oh, Catherine, I'm really stuck. What do I do? I'm worried about things in it. And the best bit of advice was just write and we'll sort it out later.
I love that.
That is very good advice.
That is
Often
brilliant.
That is
yeah,
brilliant.
that
Yes.
first draft, just put it on paper and yes, you can't work with a blank page, can you?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good advice. So Christina Giuffré, Suzi Samuel, thank you so much for spending some time this morning, this evening, depending on where you are, with Australian book lovers and sharing your lovely words and your great advice. When we wrap up our episodes, we usually say, read more Aussie books. So wondering whether you could join with us to say to people to remember to read
Read
more
more
Aussie
Aussie
books. That's lovely.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and
Thank you.
good luck with all your writing
Yes.
endeavours.
lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely.
It's been beautiful. Thank you.